If you're a fan of the 4:30 movie, you'll love Best Movies Never Made, hosted by myself, Josh Miller.
And Steven Scarlatta,
where we explore some of the greatest movies never made, like E.T. 2,
Johnny Quest,
Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian,
and Halloween 3D.
New episodes available every other Monday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi, this isn't Captain Kirk, but I have a question. What does God need with a podcast? Well, he doesn't if he has the inglorious Trexperts. Listen to them.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman, and if you're a Star Trek fan and you haven't already picked up the hardcover edition of the 50-Year Mission, it's time for you to go out and get the paperback version of the 50-Year Mission, which is just out in paperback from St. Martin's Press. This is the complete oral history of Star Trek, the first 25 years, from me and Ed Gross. And if you think you know everything there is to know about Star Trek, think again. The 50-Year Mission, out in paperback now. And if you can't read, the audiobook is still available.
Electric Now? What does that mean? It means that you can watch us do these wonderful podcasts and so many other things, too.
Hey, Darren,
yes.
When I was a kid, I used to love the Electric Company. You know why? Because I knew one day Morgan Freeman would be a great actor. But if there's one thing I love about electricity that's even better than Schoolhouse Rock and the Electric Company, it's the Electric Now channel.
But also, they're turning it on and bringing the power.
Yes, they are. And we're turning you on. And no,
that's highly inappropriate.
Okay, well, we are turning on the power here at Electric Surge, where you may have, for the last year or so, been enjoying these amazing audio podcasts like Inglorious Trexperts, the 4:30 movie, Best Movies Never Made. Now you can watch
You
them.
ain't seen nothing yet,
No,
but
you
now
haven't
you
seen
can.
anything. You can on Electric Now, available on Stirr TV and Distro TV, which you can download from your favorite app store, and soon coming to the Electric Now app. Get to see us as you've never seen us before, because you've only seen us in the theater of the imagination. Now we're going to be on your tablet, on your telephone, on your TV, and in your house.
The call is coming from inside the house.
So make sure to check out Electric Now, streaming now on Stirr TV and Distro TV, and coming soon to the Electric Now app.
Back in the 70s and 80s, before the advent of VHS, chances are if you saw a classic movie, it was on the 4:30 movie. With their famous theme weeks, it was a chance to see movies you'd never seen before and get reacquainted with some old classics. So now, join us for the 4:30 movie.
Hello, stop. This is Mark A. Altman. Stop. This is Stop the Presses Week. Stop. Welcome to Stop the Presses Week with your host, Steve Melching.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea.
Mr. Darren Docterman.
Good night and good luck.
And, of course, Ashley Edward Miller.
Oh, God, all the humanity.
That's the way it was.
Wow.
Here we are.
Fascinating.
Face to face.
Yeah.
A couple of silver spoons.
A pleasure palace he did decree. He called it Xanadu.
News on the march.
Dun, 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 dun. We, in case you haven't guessed it by yet, I know you're going to say, are insane? Yes, that's part of it. But in case you haven't guessed, we are doing Stop the Presses Week, which is all about journalism and news. Movies that show journalism, news, and newspapers. Right. Magazines, journalism, any kind of journalism. It could be broadcast journalism, too. But this is a show where all the news is real.
And it's fit to podcast.
And it's fit to podcast. It's fit to podcast. We're excited. I mean, you know, it's funny. I mean, we were talking over lunch and just saying, and we don't really pre-talk about the podcast, but we were saying that you wouldn't think of it, but there's a lot of movies. This may be one of the most difficult weeks in terms of narrowing it down to 5 movies since,
when we decided to do this topic, I started thinking about, I felt like, are there more than 3 or 4 great movies about journalism? Or
a couple.
And started making a list, and like, there are a lot of really, really strong movies about reporters and journalism. And
well, you know, it is a world which lends itself to drama in a sense because it's overheated. It's you're on a deadline. There's pressure to get things right. I mean, so inherently, you know, as a former journalist myself, I can say that journalism is very much like the film industry. You're on these tight deadlines. You're always trying to get it right. There's a lot of pressure. It really is something that seems to lend itself to dramatization, and why there's so many good movies and TV shows. And obviously, it's something that has an impact on so many people when you get it right, and even when you get it wrong. So it's really
well, the stakes are inherently high. I mean, journalists can change the world. They can uncover a story that changes the way you think about something, or changes what we think of as the truth about the world and what's really happening.
Absolutely.
For example, they might discover that there is a whole cult of werewolves living together, in a secluded resort, and that. Oh wait, sorry, that was a movie. Never mind. That was. No, sorry. I
blame it on an American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
So I have to say that. It's interesting. I mean, I actually use it as an example. I was just reading the Times the other day. There was an article about how they, American media outlets chronicled the rise of Mussolini. Mm-hmm. And it's really scary when you go back and look at it. And, everybody thought he was a big joke, and even the rise of Hitler, in the time that this was happening, people didn't really have the perspective. And so sometimes, the second draft of history is really where people get it right. The first draft can be very rough and tumble and not exactly correct. But a lot of these movies were made during the time major stories were happening. Others are dramatizations. Others are made up. Others are, made in the crucible of things happening, and others are reflecting on great moments. So we'll see. Where do you get your news, Steve?
Well, I used to be, I grew up, as we all did, in an era where I read the newspaper every day. I had a newspaper subscription, and I loved
Grit.
Grit.
I got Grit magazine.
Boy's Life, Grit. I loved reading the local paper, or the LA Times or my local paper, and I loved news magazines. I used to love to get Time or Newsweek, and watch television news, and then I think, like so many of us, I slowly transitioned to cable news, and then finally the internet. So like these days I get my news from a mixture of online sources, cable news, and local news. I don't really read the paper much anymore, although we do have a subscription to it.
So you're basically wasting paper is what you're telling me.
Exactly, yeah.
Good.
No, my wife reads the paper every day, though.
Yeah, what about you, Darren? Where do you get your news from?
Basically the same, but also all my friends tell me the news all the time. So
shut up about it.
So, I've actually over the past, 10 years or so, tried to limit my daily intake of news because it's just too, it's too nerve-wracking. Sometimes ignorance is bliss in that sense. But, there's no escaping it these days. So try to maintain, a sort of normal balance of openness and a nice, closed, happy life.
It feels to me like these days we are getting more news about less stuff. Because it felt like in the 70s and 80s, you get a very broad spectrum of news.
Right.
It wasn't just, now it just seems like it's 70% politics and and then a smaller percentage of murder and mayhem, or some weirdo story, or some a disaster that's happening somewhere. Whereas I don't know, maybe it was just the sources that I used to turn to in the 80s and 90s, but I felt like I had a broader spectrum of what was happening in other countries.
But it only feels like it's happening that way because of clickbait culture.
Yeah.
So much of the media today needs to find ways to monetize this coverage, because people who aren't just repeating what other people are saying, have to have news bureaus in foreign countries, and they got to have. Right. So everybody is, trying to put up stuff that's going to get the most views, that's going to translate into advertising dollars, and as a result, it does seem like the most insignificant things, are getting. We talked about this on the show. This whole Scorsese. Coppola thing about the MCU. It seemed to be everywhere.
Right.
Meanwhile,
Not much coverage.
the fact that kids are being ripped away from their parents is out of the news. The fact that the Amazon rainforest was out of the news. The fact that Syria was
Amazon
falling
buy
apart.
the rainforest? How did I miss that story?
But the MCU being insulted by Scorsese and Coppola was the big, above the fold in a sense. And so it's scary. It's scary because there's a lot of really important things going on in the world that are not getting the attention they
and
deserve.
a lot of these stories burn really bright for a couple of days, and then nobody talks about them again.
And people think they can just survive the news cycle. So if they've done something really horrible and illegal, they think, okay, well, if I just manage to get through these next 48 hours, then something else is going to happen, and people are going to focus on that.
Outrage will move to the
But
next
they're
on to
not
something else.
wrong.
But they're not wrong. That's true. That's true. So, I mean, that's...
Because we always need a new hit of a new drug.
Yeah.
And again, we're living in this era, so it's hard to know what the long-term, impact on our society is going to be. But there's been a fundamental shift because I think we all grew up, like you said, at 6 o'clock when we weren't watching Star Trek. We were watching the news,
Watch the
Oh,
local
news
news
before
before
the national news came
the
on.
Local news,
with these great anchors,
Yep.
Who you felt you could trust.
Yep.
And it did seem that there was a real effort to kind of get it right, get the stories right, and they took journalism very seriously as a profession.
Like Ted Baxter.
Like Ted Baxter. But, I even found, the film criticism at the time was much more serious. Yeah. And the people that wrote about film were much more educated in film than the people today who seem to, if they have a laptop, and a
Laptop and an opinion.
They feel they're entitled to, the same respect that, Richard Schickel or Pauline Kael or, any of the greats, John Maslin or anybody got. And it's Richard Corliss, and it's ridiculous.
Well, even
I say
Gene
Canby,
Siskel and
didn't
Roger
John Maslin,
Ebert.
Prison Canby.
Yeah.
And it goes back Bosley Crowther and all these people.
It could be argued that Siskel and Ebert were actually the first step in degrading the status of
the democratization of
right.
film criticism. Yeah, but
moving to a thumbs up, thumbs down, this sort of binary
you
choice.
could argue that was kind of the Star Wars of film criticism, but I would argue the thing was, regardless of how they presented their views,
they were still
extremely educated about
Absolutely.
movies.
Absolutely.
You know,
But it opened the sluice gates.
like where a bunch of people sit and talk about movies and talk about what they liked and what they hate and suggest movies.
I mean, that's
like,
ludicrous.
These people think they are. They start up podcasts, like they're weighing in on all these films with these opinions on them, and they have no particular expertise or anything that really sort of sets apart what they have to say.
But they
don't,
do
like,
have
back
a
up their
combined
assertions.
100 years experience.
Yeah, but just because you've seen Star Wars
Yeah.
87 times and Howard the Duck once does not qualify you to be an expert on movies.
That's exactly right. I mean, people like, you know what? It's like you,
have
don't
to
need
have
the
seen
microphone.
Howard the Duck more than that.
Yeah, at least a lot of times.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, some, I think even if you read on social, let's take us an example. I think what makes us legit is not only that we're too legit to quit, at least, is because you went to film school. We've
studied film.
You
history
studied
in
film
school, and aside from just being a lifelong fan,
you're not a guy who's seen a bunch of movies and I like this, I don't like that. It's like it comes from a place of knowledge.
Well, and you and I would go to the Telluride Film Festival every year and be exposed to all kinds of independent films from around the world as well as classic films. We're all members of the American Cinematheque and go to their classic
We've all read
screenings
extensively and studied film and television extensively. And why am I saying this? The point I'm saying is that expertise still matters. That it's not, there's a whole sense that we have to balance the scales on everything. That anybody who has an opinion is equal.
Right.
And that's not the case. Some people are more qualified, to talk or to offer an expertise on rather than not everyone is you're entitled to an opinion.
You have an opinion, of course.
Some people would call you a gatekeeper.
Yeah, and I am.
Some people would call you Maurice. Or the pompous of love.
Because there are people, and in all fields, and that's something I loved about the original Star Trek. It was a meritocracy. no matter who you are or where you came from, it did not matter. But if you had a level of expertise, then you deserved to succeed, you know? And it's just, I read some of these people writing about film, and it's appallingly embarrassing. It's just because there's a sense that, you know, film began with Avatar, or film began with, you know, to some people, like, you know, in the 1990s.
The Matrix.
You know, it's like, you cannot seriously talk about film if you don't have a fundamental understanding of the movies that came out in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s and the 40s.
Or at the very least, a curiosity.
Or silent film.
Right.
Or at least a curiosity. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of people young, they haven't had a chance to see a lot of these films. But, you know, you can't dismiss that. You know,
Especially in these days where everything is accessible.
Right.
yes, it's easier to see these
Not
films.
like in the days of the 4:30 movie, where the only chance we got to see older movies was on the 4:30 movie.
Right.
It's true.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. So I don't know why I went on this tangent, but
Much anger in you.
no, I'm not angry. It's just something I feel very strongly about. Actually, it's not anger at all. It's more like, you know, I wish these people had more of an interest in seeking out more about the subject they're talking about. It's like, I'm not saying that, you know, some of these people shouldn't. You know, if they feel passionately and they want to talk about this, that's great. But it's like, to hold themselves up as
So you're saying we should concentrate more on the movies?
welcome to Stop the Presses Week, where we're going to talk about journalism in all its forms, print, film, broadcast, in the movies and how it was depicted. So, Steve, Monday.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my pick, because I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And that means my
Great
pick
choice.
is Paddy Chayefsky's classic 1976 film, Network, which I absolutely love. It's a movie that dives into all the stuff we were just talking about. It talks about the tabloidization of news. It talks about the commodification of news, that transition where the news departments fell under the sway of the network and the profit center, and were expected to become a profit center for the corporation rather than a public service. To that point, you know, up into the 70s and 80s, the broadcasters had to air a certain amount of programming in the local, the national interest, or the sort of an educational thing, in order to keep their broadcasting license, and that included their nightly news show.
This is before everything was deregulated.
Yeah, exactly. And so each network had these robust foreign bureaus, you know, in the major cities of the world, with reporters and teams,
Which were loss leaders.
Yeah, they were loss leaders, and they felt they were doing, and these news people felt they were doing an important service by, you know, bringing the news of the world home, and educating the American people about what was happening, both in our own country and abroad. And suddenly, you know, things started to change in the era of deregulation, and these corporations decided they didn't like losing money on the news anymore. They wanted to make money on the news. So we saw a transition to more of the news that's, you know, the sort of tabloid news, whether it's celebrity news or, you know, news about sort of sexy news about disasters or horrible crimes or, you know, outrageous politicians or crazy things going on. And we saw that in this film, Network, taken to an extreme where the local news...
Well, seemingly extreme.
Yeah. In 1976, an extreme where the national news is suddenly a program with a live studio audience, and there's a soothsayer on doing, you know, and a gossip host, and, you know, and a Vox Populi, where we're going to, you know, poll the American people about some subject and become interactive in a way. And when this film came out in 1976, these were pretty, you know, it was a satire.
Pretty out there.
It was pretty out there. It was extreme. But now, sometime in the last 10 years or so, we just shot right past it. And it almost seems quaint now in a lot of
It's
ways.
like Howard Beale would basically get through, I'm Oh.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Finch's Howard Beale, he would do these sermon-like rants about something, and they would always climax with him passing out on stage, and I feel like, we're well past that now.
What he should have is a YouTube channel.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Then at least he could monetize it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is just a brilliant film, directed by Sidney Lumet and written by the great Paddy Chayefsky and starring Peter Finch as the news anchor, Howard Beale, a sort of Walter Cronkite-esque newsman who is kind of reaching the end of his ratings life.
The thinking man's Harry Reasoner.
Yes.
And then he says he's going to kill himself.
He's going to get fired, so he decides
television.
he's going to shoot himself live on the air. And
Because he has nothing else to live for.
Yeah. And, of course, it co-stars Faye Dunaway.
The luminous
Faye Dunaway, who has never been sexier than in that movie.
I would agree with that, I think.
Yeah. She's high-strung and kind of crazy, but also kind of crazy hot in a way. But she plays the network head of programming, so she's sort of the mastermind behind this transition of the news to this tabloid structure. And then there's the great William Holden, who plays the head of the news division, the kind of crusty old-school newsman who longs for to hang on to the days of the news as a public trust rather than as a profit center. And then there's the amazing Robert Duvall, who is the corporate hatchet man that's in there to try to cut costs and maximize profits. And then Ned Beatty playing the head of the corporation.
UBS, the head of UBS. Yeah.
Head of UBS. And this is for Beatty, it's a fairly dramatic role. It's a little funny, but it's also a dramatic role for which he was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. And this was only 2 years before Superman the movie, when he turns around. And
he's nothing like Otis in this movie.
No.
Or that whole Deliverance thing.
Yeah.
Well,
but the crazy thing is that Beatrice Straight, who played Bill Holden's wife, won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Well, she's in it 4 minutes?
Basically one scene or 2 scenes, but that one scene is amazing.
Yeah, she's great. She's absolutely great, but it's amazing.
It's a very shouty movie. A lot of people shouting in it.
Right.
Throughout.
Well, it's Paddy Chayefsky, so of course.
But very theatrical because it comes from that sort
But they
of
shout
stage tradition.
brilliant dialogue.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so well written. I mean, for anybody who's like an aspiring writer, look, he was the Aaron Sorkin of his time.
Yeah. With the hospital.
It's right. I mean, it's and Altered States, which got
again,
ruined.
your metaphors are in the wrong order.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Aaron Sorkin is the Paddy Chayefsky of but Paddy Chayefsky is the writing is so smart.
Brilliant monologue.
And so entertaining. It's not like taking your medicine.
There's Ned Beatty's big speech in the movie, for which he was probably, it was a thing that got him his Oscar nomination, where he's talking about the sort of corporate ecosystem. He's like Moses coming down and, like laying the law down. You have meddled in the primal forces of nature.
But he's doing an act because he knows that Peter Finch is insane.
Right.
And so he's doing the shtick.
Yeah.
And it's so good.
His physicality, the way he's using his hands in that, it's so theatrical and physical and terrific. And the movie, it won. Peter Finch won the Oscar.
After he died, it was a posthumous Oscar.
Yeah, for playing Howard Beale, and Dunaway won for her performance, and the Beatrice Straight, of course, and Chayefsky won for his screenplay, and it was also nominated for Best Picture for William Holden, Ned Beatty, and also Sidney Lumet, and also for editing and cinematography.
Yeah.
But that was a tough year. I mean, it lost the Best Picture Oscar to Rocky, but it was also up against All the President's Men and Taxi Driver.
Speaking of
now, that's a year.
Yeah,
that's a year. None of this 91 bullshit with Fight Club, and I forget what the other movies. Everybody says, "Oh, is that the greatest year for movies?" Talk about clickbait. Yeah. I mean, 76 that's insane.
Like Network versus Taxi Driver versus All the President's Men.
Yeah.
And then Rocky somehow wins. But Rocky's super entertaining movie. But.
Yeah, I mean, Rocky is super entertaining.
Yeah.
But they're still making great movies in Hollywood, right?
Yes.
So Network is such a great choice because it's so resonant today with what's going on, not just in the news, but specifically in politics. And but as we said, it's not like taking your medicine. It is incredibly entertaining. It's super smart. Even cutting backroom deals with a terrorist organization in order, to make a TV show about them. And then the ratings start to go down. They start to have to stage, sort of terrorist incidents to get the ratings back up.
They contract with this terrorist organization to film their acts of
their
terrorism.
bank robberies. And then this Patty Hearst-like incident.
And then the scenes where they're negotiating their deal points with the terrorist. You're not going to take anything out of my fucking back end.
And there's this voice of God like narration.
Yeah.
And those two performances, just three major. I mean, it's anchored. It's just an acting tour de force. But I watched Network again recently, and he's just as powerful and just as entertaining as it ever was. It doesn't feel dated. It feels very vibrant and alive, and
has so much energy. So much energy.
Sidney Lumet, underrated director. I mean, so much of what he did is so powerful, and Network is just it's just such a great movie. And it was back then. I think it was a United Artists movie, and it was at MGM because it was before the merger. I think it was United Artists, but that was back when they were doing really risky stuff, and it's just a really extraordinary film. A great pick. It still has a lot to say about broadcast journalism today, and where we're headed, and it foreshadowed the change. It's really amazing.
Just a quick aside about the screenplay, Paddy Chayefsky's screenplay. So I read the movie before I watched the movie, and what's really great about Chayefsky's writing, as a writer and reading him, is that his dialogue, his scenes are unadorned. Right? He essentially just writes the dialogue, and as you read it, like you hear it, you imagine it. Now, I mean, you would think that would be true of any script that you read. It's not really true. I mean, it's not that he doesn't punctuate, but he practically doesn't need to. Just the scenes are just the scenes. There's no like interrupting anything, whatever. It's just the scene starts, he sets it, and he goes. And it's really instructive in terms of breaking down how a scene can work with its own little beginning, middle, and end, all without a lot of hamburger helper in the middle to make it go. So simply as a writing exercise, if writing is your jam, if that's the thing that you appreciate, find the screenplay for a Network and read it, or really read anything that Paddy Chayefsky wrote, because it's just I think that it's something that that we as writers can learn from. And it's a really great read.
Well, it's interesting. We talked about this as a journalism movie, but there's also a lot of other stuff to unpack, in terms of it's a movie about having to kill your idols. It's a generational thing, because you have Faye Dunaway, who's on the way up. It's sort of a corporate boardroom drama, and she basically has to kill, not figuratively, not literally, Bill Holden, who she worshipped, who when she went to wanted to be a journalist, she grew up and ends up having an affair with him. But, to succeed at what she's doing, she basically has to completely cut his legs out from under him. And so it's also like this really interesting, boardroom politics.
With Duvall and Faye Dunaway, the maneuvering and the politics.
And the impact of, huge multi-corporations taking over, the public trust, being responsible. Don't worry, we'll look out for people.
Well, and Ed Beatty talking about how corporations are the new nations of the world now. There are no national borders. It's all Exxon and Monsanto and the big corporate.
And again, it was an idea that was way ahead of its time, which has proved remarkably prescient because, of course, whether it's Facebook or the big oil companies or Amazon or these companies are the new. You wonder why we haven't had a huge war, and it's because it's almost like
our countries are so bound together by these corporate interests. It's bad for business to have a war.
To have wars, exactly.
All of a sudden, we're in roller balls.
Have big wars.
Yeah,
right.
Little wars are good because in Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all these guys. You got to
keep the defense.
Yeah, but big wars, it's just it's really an interesting movie, and for anybody out there who hasn't seen it, it's absolutely something that you should have at the top of your list to go check out. It's on Blu-ray. Highly recommended.
There we are. That was Monday.
And now
brings us to Tuesday.
Tuesday, Darren Dochterman.
My mind is swimming with so many choices. But I think I have to go with one that You know, if I'm not mistaken, it was a previous selection on this show, and for the life of me, I can't remember when.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorites of all time. 1987.
Oh, is that what I thought you were going to pick?
Broadcast news.
Oh,
Was
good
it? I don't
choice.
think it was a pick.
I can tell you.
I was so sure you
a
were
great
going to
movie,
say
though.
All the President's Men,
Yeah.
and then you ducked and weaved and said broadcast news. You know, Zach? Oh, he's not here.
Yeah,
he's on
not here.
vacation.
He's on vacation.
I've got the list here. I'll check. You can.
Okay. Even if it is, I don't care because I'm picking it again.
Because it's second season, and we're allowed to repeat.
We're allowed. It is such a great film, and talk about great dialogue and great characters, and just a great sort of slice of this world of, specifically television news and journalism. It stars Holly Hunter as this young up-and-coming news producer for the local network affiliate in Washington, D.C., and her basically friend and confidant and producing partner, who is also a news writer, Albert Brooks, who is playing a character named Aaron Altman, which is why I always think of it when I'm talking with Mark.
It's not the only reason. I'm sitting on my my shirt here. Wait.
And really punching my idea.
But at least I'm not sweating.
And William Hurt as the devil.
Yeah.
That's the devil. Yeah.
You type it here, it comes out there.
Yeah. He's basically an idiot who is good at reading news
Right.
from
Whereas
a teleprompter.
Aaron
Aaron wrote it. He was there. He's a reporter. He has all the qualities of being a newsman, but that's not what they're looking for. They're looking
he's
for
a
an
superstar
anchor.
in every
Yeah,
area.
everything except the performance, where he bungles it tremendously. And it's actually one of the
He's
funniest,
sweating.
It's
It's
so
so
funniest
movie.
scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's such a great cast. A lot of the secondary characters are really good too. Jack Nicholson plays
yeah.
the
Cronkite.
network anchor.
Yeah.
I think of him more
Uncredited,
as
I believe.
yeah, I think so. But when they're having budget cutbacks at the station, and Jack comes down from New York to visit, and well, if we're not there for everybody during the hard times, then we're not a news organization. It's really great, and
Well, then
everyone
they
is
ask
so
him if
good.
he's willing to cut his salary.
Yeah, right.
He's like, fuck off.
Of course, it would be a lot better if you could cut a little out of your salary. He just looks at him. It's so good. Robert Prosky is also I think he's the news director at the station. But it's also a really great love triangle story between Holly Hunter and these two sides of the same coin, and it's really heartbreaking because no one is wrong and no one is right. And it's the way the movie resolves this is so real and so sad, but it's reality.
Yeah.
And it's not a Hollywood ending. It's not everyone's great at the end. It's just there. And it's real. And I love this movie. I quote it all the time. It's
You'll never make more than $20,000. Hey, that sounds pretty good.
I love this movie too, and this is the movie I think that I fell in love with Holly Hunter on.
Oh, absolutely.
She's just adorable in it. And speaking of Succession,
right.
Oh, wow. I was thinking the same. I would say the same thing.
But, yeah, Holly
Really
Hunter's
a lot
terrific.
appreciate it.
Well, watching Succession recently, and Holly Hunter is spectacular in that. It made me think of broadcast news, which I hadn't watched in a while, and I threw it on, and like you guys, I love broadcast news. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and yet it's not the sexy one that I talk about a lot and I think about a lot, but I mean, I love that from the moment I saw it. I've seen it a billion times. Criterion did a great Blu-ray of it.
Directed by James L. Brooks, who has done a string of amazing films, and of course, the producer of The Simpsons. But before that, he was also, he produced the Mary Tyler Moore Show, which was another sort of newsroom comedy sitcom that was in the 70s.
But what was so interesting about this, it takes sort of the tropes of like a classic screwball comedy, like, His Girl Friday, and combines it with a serious look at the state of journalism.
Complete reality.
Yeah, well, he did a ton of research. Like he was researching it for years, and so he takes the sort of movie of the love triangle and combines it with a really serious, astute look at the state of journalism circa 1987, and it just comes together so perfectly. It has a lot to say, but it is immensely entertaining
and again,
super funny,
extremely prescient.
Yeah, very much so.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And this was right before the big influx of cable news.
Right.
And I'm surprised it's not a movie that more people know and more people talk about. This is one of the reasons I love doing the show, for you to say something like this, because this is a movie that needs to get more love.
Absolutely. Network is a classic that everyone knows about and has a huge footprint, but broadcast news is just as good in its own way and kind of is in the shadow.
Well, it was also an Oscar nominee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. And it didn't win, did it?
No.
I don't think it did.
Yeah, and it should have.
I feel like it was the first truly, I was about to say adult movie, but
I know
not
what
adult
you mean.
film, but adult
grown up
movie that I saw in the theater, and I would actually liken it to. This is going to sound perhaps nuts, but that's me. Silverado, in the sense that it is this.
Wait, I got to stop you for that. Did he just compare broadcast news to Silverado?
Well, let me do the comparison.
Okay.
So the comparison is. Broadcast news it's effervescent, and it's so entertaining, and you love it, and then for whatever reason people don't talk about it. Now, broadcast news is certainly a much more serious.
It's
film
underappreciated.
Yes, exactly. Just you don't really think about Silverado when you think about westerns, but the truth of the matter is that movie is just goddamn entertaining. Yeah. And it was about the same time, the same.
Silverado was first, but
yeah.
It's
a movie that if you haven't seen it, you can just recommend it to somebody to watch because you know that they'll enjoy it. It's not something that is so of its time, or is trying overly hard to be important. It just says things that are true.
Yeah. And there's not a bit of pretension in it.
No, not
which
at all.
I love.
Not at all.
And it was nominated for 7 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Cinematography, Screenplay, Editing. William Hurt, Holly Hunter, and Albert Brooks for their acting, but it didn't win any.
Yeah,
and Albert Brooks is freaking amazing.
He's so good in it.
Yeah.
And he's so real, and it's so painful.
Might be his best, my favorite performance.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's funny because up until that point, people sort of consider him the poor man's Woody Allen. Because he did stuff like Modern Romance, and but with this movie, he emerged as like a movie star.
Yeah,
I mean, he's so great at it.
In this guy.
And then he started doing stuff like Defending Your Life, and really significant films. But yeah, he's great in it, and as you say, one of the most interesting love triangles, where everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
It tears your freaking heart out.
Yeah,
because it's all real.
Yes, very much. And in that sense, it's different. But then you have the screwball comedy, trying to get the tape to the satellite. Bobby Boy. And and just dealing with the whole manipulation of the news with the veteran who they have the 2 takes on the story and just.
And some great, almost cameos. I mean, Joan Cusack plays the office assistant, and she's great and really has a couple of great scenes in it. And just everyone's really good.
I'm so glad he picked that because it spared me from having to pick it, so now I can pick something else I love.
And it was not picked previously. I think we discussed it on Love Story Week, maybe.
Yeah,
but,
we had talked about
it. It was not an official selection.
Good. Well, then so there you go. I'm joyous.
I'm surprised it took us this long to get to broadcast
news.
Me too. It's a great movie. Okay, so Wednesday, Mr. Ashley E. Miller.
Okay, so once I'm going to try to go a little bit out of the box, but the truth is, I think that this movie has a lot in common with Network in kind of an unexpected way, in the sense that it is a dark, satirical view of the news, our relationship with it, and how the news sees itself in a very particular moment in time. It is one of my I would say it's one of my favorite movies of the last 5 or 6 years or so. It's a dark little thriller called Nightcrawler from 2014, starring Jake Gyllenhaal as a sociopath, essentially, who when we meet him, we realize just what a terrible human being he is. He has no appreciation for the suffering of others. He exists only to consume. I feel as though I just paraphrased Star Trek, but he exists only to consume things, to take things,
Much like the Doomsday Machine.
much like the Doomsday Machine, and then at the end he somebody flies into his mouth and they explode. I don't know. We're taking the metaphor too goddamn far. Too far. We, just me. I am. But we're all in this thing together. This thing of ours.
Are we?
Are we? Yeah. Anyway, so Jake Gyllenhaal, not the man, his character, learns about this very particular job in journalism called a stringer. The stringer basically would go around to the sites of accidents and take pictures or video or whatever and feed it to the local news station. Okay, so he goes out, he gets himself a camcorder, and he starts hunting. He becomes a night crawler looking for these accidents. And as the movie proceeds, and he gets really good at getting close to these things, he will rearrange.
Too good.
Too good. Exactly. Too good. He rearranges accident sites. Like, he puts bodies in different positions. He doesn't care. And he uses this sociopathic charm to manipulate Rene Russo, who plays his boss, at the local news network. They become so dependent on him because of what he's delivering. It is both awful to look at, and you can't take your eyes off of it. He manipulates her into sex, into money, into you name it. He hires another guy who I don't think he realizes exactly what he's getting himself into. And the movie's crisis is really about, he does a lot of shit. Like, he starts killing people. But the crisis of the movie is about Gyllenhaal taking video of a home invasion. And he withholds information that he has. Like, he has video of the dudes' faces. He knows, their license plate number. He doesn't give it to the cops. Why? Because he's going to set up just this whole thing that he's going to capture on video, and it's basically going to be like his Mona Lisa. It's going to be, his great moment as a stringer. And just Jake Gyllenhaal is so amazing in this movie. The tone of it is so controlled. You just watch it and you're just in for the entire ride. It's so unbelievably dark, yet I also felt like through every frame of it, I believed that there could be somebody out there just like this guy, right? He was giving us what we wanted. And it's almost like he couldn't see that there was anything, that there was a moral dimension to the job that he was doing, that essentially had transformed news, human suffering, into entertainment, which is I thought just fascinating. So I love this movie. And again, I think it's very much in that network school of, we're getting to this place, it's just what we talked about, where all of these things that seemed like satire in the 1970s are suddenly coming true. It's like we're just this close in the world of Nightcrawler. We're just this close from The Running Man. You know what I mean? That's kind of where we are.
But it's funny because Nightcrawler is a movie that was only made a couple of years ago, and yet already, like you said, it feels prescient. And we're not talking 1970s.
Yeah,
we're talking,
exactly. We're talking 2014.
Yeah. That's it's funny you said, this is going to be another Ashley out there pick. I don't think that's out there at all. I think that's actually a really smart
and I like
pick.
it because I think we've switched positions. This is one that I haven't seen.
Okay, cool.
So I would like to see it now.
I think you'll dig it, man.
It's dark, though. It might be a little dark for you.
It's hella dark, dude. But it's not like it's a serial. Well, it kind of is a serial killer movie, but it's not. it's very distanced from its own violence. I think you might dig it a lot. Huh?
Kubrickian.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, for sure.
And Bill Paxton is in it too. I think it's one of his last
Very
film
last,
roles.
yeah. It's Dan Gilroy.
Dan Gilroy. Yeah.
Yep.
Game over.
Well, that's a great choice. This is a tough week. This is a really tough week. A lot of great choices. And as I said, I mean, as a journalist, I've I worked for the Boston Globe when I was in college, and worked for a lot of newspapers and magazines.
What will you do?
New
What
book,
will you
50
do?
Year Mission, is in paperback now, wherever you buy books. But it's funny because thank you for lifting the burden of broadcast news from my shoulders.
You
'cause
were
that
going
was
to pick
really
that at one point, weren't
It was really complicating things for me. I'm still in a bit of a pickle. I am gonna, unlike you, who is playing by the rules of season 2. Man, we can do whatever we want. That season 1 no longer applies. I'm gonna honor season 1 by not picking All the President's Men.
Yeah. Okay.
Look, All the President's Men would absolutely be my pick.
Sure.
Alan Pakula's masterpiece about the investigation of Watergate. It's super applicable today, and obviously Bob Woodward is still a force in journalism, sounding the alarm about our current state of affairs. But I'm not going to pick it because it was picked in season 1. We talked about it at length. Yeah. I'm going to do something which won't be unexpected to Steve, I don't think. I got 3 words: match me, Sydney.
Oh yeah, I thought you might pick that for a different episode, but yes.
And the movie, of course, is Sweet Smell of Success, written by Cliff Odets, directed by Alexander McKendrick. Stars Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis. I have a beautiful one sheet in my house for it, and it is that Clifford Odets dialogue. I mean, particularly for all of us who are writers, with the exception of Darren, who are writers.
It all.
No, what?
Darren wouldn't appreciate it at all.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we have an extra appreciation of Clifford Odets. I mean, he's so rife with quotable dialogue.
Every cookie full of arsenic.
You're like I hate to take a bite out of you. You're like a cookie laced with arsenic. And then it's like cats in the bag, bags in the river. I mean, which we use that scene in Free Enterprise because I just love it so much. So, it's a story of this, big, back in the day when like Walter Winchell and Hedda Hopper and all these people had so much power in the daily newspaper. This postulates a world in which there's this J.J. Hunsucker, played brilliantly and terrifyingly by Burt Lancaster, and Tony Curtis is down on his luck PR guy who's just desperate to get his lame clients into the column, and he'll do anything for Hunsucker to try and get him to write about his clients. And meanwhile, he's trying to, he won't wear a jacket because he don't have to pay the tip, to the hat check girl for checking his bag. And there's all these great power scenes at 21. It's funny because I'm a big advocate of journalism and how important it is and how powerful and how sometimes it gets a bad rap and how most people are trying to get it right. And I think this whole era where the press has become a boogeyman and a punching bag. So I'm picking a movie which is guilty of all those sins. It is just an utter masterpiece. It could easily fit in a film noir week as well. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's a great. And a great time capsule of an old age, right. 21, New York at 21, 21 back in the...
or at least what we think it was.
New York was like back then, where a few people had held immense power and sway, and the idea that these newspapers, had so much power, the era of the Hearst newspapers and things like that.
They would publish multiple editions during
their day and stuff. And, if nothing else, Burt Lancaster is so good at it. And for everybody, who knows Tony Curtis from, Some Like It Hot and what a fast little comedian he is, he plays this wormy weasel in this.
Sleaze weasel.
He's a sleaze weasel.
A sleazel.
And he's so great. And it's just, and the black and white
Gorgeous
photography by James Wong Howe. Yeah. From the opening frames of a stack of newspapers being deposited in Times Square at a newsstand till the final shots, which I won't give away for those of you who haven't seen it. It's funny because again we all talked about this, like we're doing a journalism week, and then you look. And some of my favorite movies of all. They're more. I think they're more of my favorite movies of all time on this list: Network, Broadcast News, Sweet Smell Success. Sorry, no Nightcrawler.
Okay.
All the President's Men. Than any of the weeks we've done.
Yeah.
So it's really that I didn't really have to struggle, particularly after you got me off the hook with Broadcast News and Network. I could have picked either. I could have easily picked either of those. So really, that'd be my pick for Thursday.
Well, thank God for that.
Okay, so but now we're to Friday.
We're at
so
Friday.
many
Well,
movies we
speaking
haven't
of
talked
Friday,
about. Yes.
I mean, come on. How do you not program His Girl Friday on the 4:30 movie?
Well,
in journalism week.
That's a good point. His Girl Friday, which is the comedic remake of The Front Page, with Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant. One of the great journalism movies of all time. One of the funniest movies of all time. It's Howard Hawks with that quick dialogue.
Yep.
However,
there is another.
there is another. And to me, I mean, this has to be Friday.
Does it
in
also
my
have the
mind.
word Friday in it?
It does not, so you may have an advantage over my pick. The ultimate movie about journalism that I think has ever been made is Citizen Kane.
Ooh.
It is not only the greatest movie ever made.
That passed my mind. Yeah.
It's about the Hearst, William Randolph Hearst.
Well, it's
thinly veiled.
About Hearst and others.
And others, yeah,
but
absolutely.
mostly Hearst.
And even to his dying days, Wells would say, "Oh, it wasn't really about Hearst," and
Cough, cough.
But if you,
Well, my favorite story of that Wells told about this. Take it with a grain of salt, or a block of salt. He says that after Kane had opened, and it was about to open, and Wells found himself in an elevator with William Randolph Hearst, and
Awkward.
and he says he offered him tickets to the premiere of the film, even though his papers had been trying to
kill the film. Yeah, and they wouldn't allow them to be screened in any of his theaters.
Right.
They wouldn't accept advertising. It almost bankrupted RKO because it spent a fortune on the movie.
Wells says he offered him tickets to the opening night, and Hearst said, "Thank you, no." And Wells says, if he had been Kane, he would have taken the tickets.
That's really funny.
Yeah, Citizen Kane is one of those movies that, obviously has a well-earned reputation as being the greatest film of all time, or one of the greatest films of all time. And I remember growing up, always hearing about it and seeing it referenced in Looney Tunes cartoons. But I'd never seen it until I got to film school, and they showed it in my History of American Film class. I think it was at the end of the semester, and I was kind of nervous about seeing it. I thought, what if I don't like it? It's considered one of the greatest movies of all time. And so I kind of went into it arms crossed, thinking, okay, Citizen Kane, impress me.
All right, old movie, show me something.
I was just riveted through the whole thing. It is one of my favorite movies. It's terrific. It really deserves its reputation as one of the best, American films.
Thought it might be
on
fun
every
to
level.
run a newspaper.
The acting is and incidentally, my great grandfather worked on Citizen Kane. He was in the construction department at RKO, and he worked on building some of the sets.
He dug the ditch that they put the camera in to get the low angle.
That's right.
This could have also fit in spoiler week as well.
Yeah, no kidding.
Look, I understand a lot of people, you think Iron Man is the greatest movie of all time. I get it. I understand. We all like Iron Man too.
But even giving away the spoiler in the movie doesn't ruin the movie.
Well, I knew what it was.
Because
I
it's
mean,
not.
It's
not really important.
Yeah, it's not.
It's
That's
not.
the thing.
It's a great twist, though.
Yeah.
Because you have to answer that question of, why this was his dying words.
Right.
Because
it's a mystery, and you got to solve the mystery unless you're
Who was
JJ,
this
right? It's not a mystery box. There's actually something in the mystery box.
Right.
So, and it's a very satisfying ending, I think.
Yeah,
but it's
very
not like
satisfying.
the movie doesn't live and die by
Yeah.
the fact that, oh my God, Harry Angel is
Yeah.
Johnny
It's like
Favorite.
It's the journey, not the destination.
Yeah.
Right. It's like the twist of that film is he's a monster, he's a monster, he's a monster. No, he's a human. He's a little boy. That's and it's beautiful. I mean,
He's been dead the whole time.
Exactly. Through the whole movie, you keep waiting. It's like Psycho, right?
Yeah, a few years ago, I finally got to visit Hearst Castle, and that's like it's the craziest thing. Like this is like it is based on this guy, and like this is the real Xanadu. Like this, it's a real place.
I had the same experience.
It's crazy,
and it's kind of amazing. A pleasure palace he did decree here in Xanadu.
It's and it's a lot of fun. It's really funny, and
It's really funny.
And Wells is great. He's amazing.
The only performance
he was
he ever gave. I'm sorry. go ahead.
24 at the time, playing a young man, a middle-aged man, and an old man, and they're all convincing. I mean, to various degrees, but he's amazing. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say the only performance he ever gave, I think that was close to it, were all the outtakes from the Paul Masson wine commercials.
It was all the veteran players from his Mercury Theater, and they're all great. Joseph Cotton, Everett Sloan, Agnes Moorehead. Yeah, I mean, everyone is so good in that movie.
Yeah.
And then they talk about how I forget the woman in Kane, but is not Marion Davies, because Marion Davies actually had talent.
Right.
But it's more
Susan
like
Alexander.
Susan Alexander, yeah. And, but they say that's what Hearst was most upset about.
Yes.
And, again, this kind of reminds me, Succession reminds me a lot of Citizen Kane, which is maybe why I like it so much.
Yeah.
Citizen Kane, and we haven't even talked
That's
about
a good contender for Friday.
how it reinvented cinema.
Well,
it pioneered these techniques.
It almost
that are-
invented it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Greg Tolan, who was the amazing cinematographer, who basically walked into Wells's office asking to work on the movie because he said, I want to work with someone who hasn't done this before.
Yeah.
And I think he said, we can learn from each other, and I can teach you the technical things over a weekend. But I think I would like to see what you want to do.
The way you think, yeah.
And,
and Bernard Herrmann, too, remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah,
That score.
Who was another one of Wells's people from New York. But it's marvelous.
Okay, so that's a contender. His Girl Friday,
Yeah.
for Friday for sure.
Anchorman.
Anchorman. That's so funny.
I mean,
Can you beat the scene where like the dog jumps down like into the bear pit and begs for their lives? I mean, come on.
Hayden Christensen is great in Shattered Glass. Which is again about journalism gone wrong, faking a news story. He's very good at it. I know
He's great.
he's very good at it.
except for the part where he talks about sand.
Spotlight was a wonderful movie, but it got an Oscar, which is enough of a recognition for that movie. I really like Spotlight quite a bit.
Yeah, I do too.
It wouldn't be my pick for Friday. It's just kind of a very competently done movie.
It's not an enjoyable movie.
The same way that I think The Post is very well done.
Yeah.
But not, anything so special that it should have our Friday slot.
The Post is great in a world that doesn't have All the President's Men in it.
Yeah, true enough. Yeah, true enough.
Because it's like All the President's Men done without the good parts.
We're all big fans of Paul Newman here. Absence of Malice is a really good movie.
Superman the movie.
Right?
Yeah, well, of course, Daily Planet.
Right.
And
It's got
contribution
Howling.
to journalism.
Right?
The Howling.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Young photojournalist.
You're not taking this in the spirit it was intended.
Of course it is.
That's kind of my job.
I mean, look at the impact of a movie like China Syndrome. Back in the time when 3 Mile Island had just happened. You remember the big laughs it would get when it said, "Oh, this could destroy a state the size of what was it, Connecticut or Delaware or whatever it was, Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania." And where 3 Mile Island had happened 2 weeks before the movie was. Yeah. And that's also a movie which people remember because 3 Mile Island. It's actually quite good.
I don't think
Michael
people
Douglas
remember
and
that movie.
Jane Fonda.
Honestly.
Do you feel that way? People don't remember.
Yeah.
Have you watched it recently?
No.
I watched it, and it's a really good little thriller.
Jack Lemmon.
I hadn't seen it in a while, and it was on TV. I think I was like channel surfing. I don't even have it on Blu-ray. It was like the one movie I don't have on Blu-ray, and I was like channel surfing. And for some reason, it was like on, and I don't know. I was bored, and I watched it. And I was like, I got wrapped up. I'm like, I forgot how good this movie is.
was one of my favorites, Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole.
I was just
Yes.
gonna say.
A really great black comedy about a media circus that develops around miners trapped in a hole.
Well, that was the title in the United States, wasn't it? The Big Circus.
Miners trapped in a hole.
When they did a version,
The
Big Circus, yeah. Because and that also talk about a film that's very resonant today.
Yes.
I mean, Kirk Douglas basically milks this story because it brings him to fame. He has no money, and it's like he gets tied up with he's the only one who can communicate with this miner, and he could have saved him, but he wants the story
to keep the story going.
Keep the story going, and he's great. What was his name in that, Kirk Douglas in Ace in the Hole?
I don't recall, but it's.
But it wasn't Ace.
That
there
movie
was
is
a hole.
cookie laced with arsenic.
Yeah.
Billy Wilder. Oh man, so good.
And there's a really great. I think there's a great Criterion Blu-ray of that.
Yeah,
that's out now.
Or was it the Big Carnival or the Big Circus? I think it was the Big. I don't know.
Gosh, one of the two.
But Ace in the Hole is where it goes now, and it's so good. It's so good. That's another one to really, like, if you haven't seen it, you should get the Criterion or watch on the Criterion channel.
Wasn't it kind of lightly blacklisted for a time?
Well, because they hated the idea. It was so dark that Kirk Douglas, America's sweetheart, was so loathsome that he's down on his luck and he's milking this thing, and he lets. I think that it was just this
so uncomfortable
for people that they were not. How could anyone do this?
It's kind of been rediscovered. It's kind of had a renaissance in recent years, but for a long time it was one that people only kind of whispered about it, but it wasn't popular.
Yeah.
Here's a out of the box. Capricorn 1.
I don't know if that's really a journalism movie. It's more a conspiracy thriller.
I think that movie would work just fine without Elliot Gould in it, honestly.
Well,
guys,
do O.J. Simpson week. It'll be
Right.
great.
O.J. Simpson.
We're not considering Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Oh my God, that's such a great idea.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
Hunter S. Thompson.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all over Citizen Kane. I have to tell you, I'm going to have a hard time.
Almost
off of
Famous.
Yeah, it's good. Cameron Crowe, and he's with the band, based on his real experiences covering rock bands as a young man for Rolling Stone. Yep,
Terrific movie.
No Citizen Kane.
Parallax View.
Yeah, that's great.
Frost Nixon.
Frost Nixon, that's a really good little film. It's maybe my favorite Ron Howard movie.
And, one of my favorites. I forgot. The Insider.
Oh, yeah.
Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
A really terrific movie about the cigarette industry.
Save it for Russell Crowe.
Directed by Michael Mann.
Save it for Michael.
Yeah.
Mann right now.
And you could argue The Social Network is also about faux journalism. Given how important,
sort of in retrospect,
how important Facebook has become to the news these days. A lot of people getting their news from there, real news and not.
I'm every passing day, I'm more optimistic that we're going to get a sequel to The Social Network. Just was it yesterday? Aaron Sorkin penned an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg.
I know.
It's called Tinderized.
So I have a feeling we may get the band back together for Social Network 2. The anti-social network.
The anti-social network. That's great, Steve. You should pitch that.
There's The Killing Fields.
Oh, yeah. Sam Waterston is the New York Times reporter who uncovers Cambodia, the Cambodian genocide. Yeah.
Good Night and Good Luck. From
first film directed by, was it the first film directed by Clooney?
Yeah,
No, the one it was second film. He had done the Chuck Barris movie first.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Good Night and Good Luck about Edward R. Murrow is a wonderful film.
It's a solid movie.
And Edward R. Murrow deserves all our appreciation and as much love as he can get, particularly in a world where people don't know who Edward R. Murrow is anymore.
No, that's true.
But I think it just always comes back to Citizen Kane.
I think there's no,
What do you
there's
think,
no
Ashley?
question.
Well, I think it's not very often we get an opportunity to make the Friday movie a movie with the word Friday in it. But
Anchorman it is.
That's right, though, about the His Girl Friday. Shit. His Girl Friday, it is kind of a super fun, entertaining movie about journal. No, God,
Yeah, but it's not
Kane.
Citizen Kane.
It's not Citizen Kane.
Nothing
Even I
is
would
Citizen
concede
Kane.
that, and I love His Girl Friday. But no, I agree. I think Citizen Kane is the Just
when
the day
you
to hit it.
when you get the disc of Citizen Kane, if you can find it still, or if you can get it on Apple, there's a commentary by Roger Ebert that is absolutely great.
Yep.
Didn't you and I, Mark, watch that commentary on the flight to Sitges on the DVD?
I can't believe you remember that because I remember watching the commentary on a plane.
Yeah.
I forgot it was with you through the dual
Yeah.
headphone players. When I had
That's
one of those stupid
adorable.
DVD
Little
portable
portable
DVD
DVD player.
players, and I had the dual headset.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
so romantic.
It was just Steve and I, and we were going
8-hour
to
flight.
Sitges.
Wow.
Paris.
That was the year I was on the jury in Sitges, and you
Yeah.
came along, and we
Yeah.
had the best time.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
It was really fun. We had a lot of fun that trip.
And who was it? Boy, we were partying with. There were some interesting
Who
people.
were we
there.
partying with?
Well, there was that actress from Blade
Oh,
Runner.
what was her name? Who was on the jury with me?
Zora.
No. It wasn't.
Well, yeah. Well,
It was Mappy Gallen.
yeah.
But then it was Begonia and.
Oh, and Floria Sigismondi,
Oh,
who's
that's
a
right.
director now, a big
Oh,
director.
she's great. She's great, and her boyfriend was great, or fiance at the time, or whatever. But Floria was so good, and she had an art exhibit there, and she was on the jury. And I've said this on a previous podcast. I think we were talking about her movie, The Runaways. And she's somebody I really regret losing touch with, but she was such an interesting person.
Yeah, she was cool.
You know,
She was cool to hang out with.
I really liked.
Tune in next time to hear the rest of this amazing story.
Stephen, Mark, go to Sitges.
romantic getaway.
We're really on we're having a tough time coming up with podcasts. So we're gonna do Screwball Comedy Week just so we
Stephen
can make
Mark's
Yeah.
excellent
Right.
adventure.
Damn right.
Yeah, that was great. You know, Mike just left. Mike just left Sitges, the deputy director.
And we're back.
Okay. Anyway, so Monday,
is Network.
Tuesday,
Broadcast news.
Wednesday,
Nightcrawler.
Thursday, it's Sweet Smell of Success, followed on Friday immediately by Citizen Kane.
And Kane.
Thanks for joining us for the 4:30 movie. And if you're a fan of this podcast, you may want to check out Electric Surge's other podcasts, like Inglorious Trexperts every Saturday, and The Rebel and the Rogue, a Star Wars podcast, every Tuesday, and of course, Best Movies Never Made every other Monday.
Every other Monday.
And now, if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It's 5 stars. 5 stars.
5 stars.
Stop the presses. 5 stars.
Not 4, 5.
And
And of course, join us at 430movie.com to get all sorts of wonderful 430 movie
Oh
swag.
my gosh, yes. If you want to
Yes.
enjoy that great 4:30 movie swag, you got to
Check out our
check us out.
spokesmodel, Steve Melching, who
This
is
is the Conan
Right.
430 movie.
And
Yeah.
also his 4:30 movie mug. And I do believe you have a 4:30 movie notebook as well.
Yes, I keep all my 430 movie notes in my 430
Check
movie
out
notebook.
all that great 4:30
All
movie
that
swag.
swag.
So you should check us out at 430moviepodcast.com.
No,
430
430movie.com.
430movie.com. Okay. Or
Yes.
call 1-800. No.
There's no 1-800.
There's no
and
1-800
no
number.
900 or 976. That
You can
much
just
is
call
certain.
Darren.
And a very
Yeah.
special thanks, John. Thanks for being here, recording our us going on about all this nonsense. And very special thanks, of course, as always, to Bill Ritter. Bill, what's your pick for Hold the Press this week?
How about Pelican Brief?
Pelican Brief with Denzel and Julia Roberts.
Okay.
I always thought they were hard to put briefs on.
Yeah, really, truly.
They're more of a boxer's
Yeah.
bird.
No.
Oh my God! So thank you, everyone here at Electric Surge. And if you want to see this podcast
With
on
your
video,
eyes.
with your eyes and not just your ears,
Put it in your
check
eye
us
holes.
out on Electric Now, currently on Distro TV and Stirr, and coming to additional streaming channels soon, as well as the Electric Now app. So watch the space for some very exciting announcements. But in the interim, you can check out 430 Movie and some of our other Electric Surge podcasts every day on Electric Now. So hopefully,
Hopefully that won't turn you off to the whole thing.
exactly,
Yeah.
you get to see our smiling faces.
Yeah, you know what? We've got faces made for radio.
They had faces back then. So on behalf of Steve, Darren, Ashley, and myself. Stop the presses! Stop the presses! We're
We interrupt
done.
this broadcast for an important news announcement.
That's right.
I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
We'll see you next week.
This episode is brought to you by Milliways. If you've done 6 impossible things this morning, why not round it off with breakfast at Milliways, the restaurant at the end of the universe?
This is a production of the Electric Surge Network.